raise that or have that one?
I'll raise it. Is it?
It's the eyes. And even with it this close to my face and 16 font, I'm putting on my glasses. So, we have been doing a series called The Church, the Inconvenient Call of the Kingdom. And the title of mine today is Risking in Faith, Living in Love. To begin with, I want you to know I'm working off the premise that taking a risk means that you can't control the outcome, right? That's a risk. You don't know what's going to happen, and there's usually the risk, the possibility of failure. Now, with something like parachuting, you got a big risk. You could have catastrophic injury, you could have death. But there's also risks that we take that are not that big, but they're still a risk. It can be a little frightening to step out knowing that you may experience rejection, or you may get your feelings hurt, or, as I said, you just may fail. So I think the reality is that when we are considering taking a risk, what we're actually considering is the possible outcomes. Is it worth taking this risk? Now, for me, the excitement of parachuting is not worth the risk. I will say that several years ago, I had the opportunity to take hang gliding lessons. This is where they were, Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. You may remember that that's where the Wright brothers did their first flight. And it makes sense, because if you're gonna land in a bad way, landing on sand dunes is probably a good idea. I was totally ready to take these lessons until I found out how much they cost. And then I didn't. But the point is, I was willing to take this risk, knowing that I could possibly be hurt, because it was more than worth the possibility of knowing what it was like to fly. So we all take risks, and taking a risk means asking the specific question, what are the potential outcomes, good or bad, and is it worth the risk? Okay, that's my mini lecture on taking risks. Back to my title, Risking in Faith, Living in Love. What do I mean by that? The founder of the Vineyard movement, John Wimber, used to always say that faith is spelled R-I-S-K. And that makes sense. Because, for instance, if you've ever stepped out in faith to pray for someone, or someone's asked you to pray, you're kind of taking a risk. Because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You're hoping that it's going to be what you ask for, but you're not in control of the outcome. God is. And He may have other plans. He may not choose to answer that prayer exactly the way you wanted at that time and at that place. So yes, it's a bit of a risk to ask for prayer and to offer prayer. Or maybe you've had a strong impression, or you've actually felt like you heard the word of the Lord telling you to take a risk and move somewhere, maybe to another country. Or maybe He's telling you to change jobs or professions. Or maybe He's telling you to give a chunk of money away. All of those are taking risks. Now, I think it's worth it to take the risk of being obedient to God. But it is a risk. We're going to look at chapter 11 of Hebrews today, because this chapter is pretty much devoted to the idea that faith is spelled R-I-S-K. It's a bunch of names that you read in the Bible and that you'll recognize, and all of them chose to live by faith/risk. It begins with, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. And then it begins to talk about these various heroes of the faith as we refer to them. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. Okay, he has to have been afraid. I mean, and people were no doubt making fun of him, maybe even being violent. Who knows what he went through in order to take that risk, that step of faith. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he didn't know where he was going. And it wasn't just him, remember, it was him, it was his family, it was his servants, his entire household, all of his animals, all of his possessions. We're all going somewhere, I don't know where, but that's what God told us to do. He took a risk. By faith, Abraham, when tested, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. I'm not even going to get into that. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born. By faith, Moses left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. He had met the living God. And so he was willing to leave the life that he'd known behind, living in the royal palace, and go. By faith, Moses kept the Passover, the application of blood that saved the firstborn of Israel. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what they had been promised. That doesn't mean that God didn't come through. What it means is that they didn't receive their complete reward. Some of them, the reward was after they had passed on and came to the generations after them. None of us is going to receive our full reward until we come face to face with Jesus and get to live eternity with him. And there were those in this story that were jeered at, were tortured, were exiled. Some of them were even put to death. Hebrews chapter 11 is faith spelled R-I-S-K personified. This is, in fact, taking a risk to step out in faith, even though you can't control the consequences or the results. Okay, so maybe what this is telling me is that I need to be prepared. I need to be listening for God to call me out to take a big risk in some big, giant, scary way. And that may be true. God may call you to take some really big risks, but there's something else to consider. In John 13:34 and 35, it says, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." For context, this is the Last Supper. This is Jesus meeting formally with his disciples for the last time before he is going to leave the earth. And so I think everything that he says during the Last Supper is pretty important. These are his last instructions to his disciples. The verse before says, "My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I am telling you now, where I am going, you cannot come." Jesus is very near to the end of his ministry, leaving his disciples to carry on what he started. And even though he's going to be sending the Holy Spirit to guide them and comfort them and empower them, it's not the same as having flesh and blood Jesus right there in front of you. So knowing this, he chooses as one of the last things to tell them, "A new command I give you, to love one another." And he says, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Jesus is giving the disciples and us a very practical, doable, although it not always easy, way to continue to be a follower of Christ and to let others know that we are followers of Christ. Now think about it. Nowadays, how do non-Christians learn about Jesus? Hopefully not from the world. Because if they're watching the news or social media or whatever, they're hearing a lot of bad stuff because the church does mess up quite a bit. If you look at American history, we were started by a bunch of pilgrims escaping persecution from the Church of England. The Pilgrims came for that reason, and then the Puritans came for that reason. But then guess what? The Puritans persecuted the Quakers. And then the Anglicans of Virginia persecuted the Baptists. And then the Protestants in general all persecuted the Catholics. And then the Catholics persecuted the Mennonites. The church has not always been great at this, and yet Jesus told us this is vitally important. You need to love one another. And you might be sitting there right now saying, yeah, but I don't agree with that group. Or that group does it this way, and I don't think that's right. That's not what Jesus said. He said we are to love one another, period. So if you've got this non-Christian and they've never been to church and they've never looked at a Bible and they don't believe in the Bible anyway and they didn't grow up with Bible stories, what are you going to do? How are they going to learn about Jesus? And the answer is you. And I don't mean preaching and teaching and quoting scripture, because in normal relationships you don't normally get to do that. What I mean is, you are Jesus to that person. You are the teachings of the Bible to that person. When you think about that, that's maybe a different kind of risk that you're taking, representing Jesus to the world. Back to the sermon title, Risking in Faith, Living in Love. So, of course, my question is, what if what Jesus said here is really, really, really important? And what if that means not just loving those that you find easy to love and that you feel comfortable with, but it means taking a risk, for us introverts, taking a risk, stepping out of your comfort zone, and loving those that seem like they're a risk to you. Because whether they are difficult to love or very different than me, or people that I just don't relate to, or that I don't necessarily quite understand, the reality is most of us are faced with this sort of thing almost every day, whether or not to take a risk and step out in love. It could be your neighbors. It could be a new family member, somebody that's come into your family by marriage or whatever. It could obviously be your coworkers or teachers or students. It could also just be people that you see on an ongoing basis, like the checker at the grocery store or the barista that you get your coffee from almost every day. People that you wouldn't normally, necessarily, naturally think to reach out to develop a relationship, and to love. Side note, my husband did this all the time for years at our local Coffee Bean, to the point that one of the baristas asked him to perform their marriage. Another one of the baristas that proudly announced that she was an atheist became a Christian. It's really important. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. Besides the fact that it's a really good thing to love people, why? Because then everyone will see that you are disciples, you are followers of Jesus. Risking in faith, living in love, what if it's really important? You know, the title of this series is The Inconvenient Call of the Kingdom. Because sometimes God causes us to take risks that are, in fact, inconvenient. But you know where else He tells us to take these risks? Here in this church. To reach out and relate in love. In this community. There are people all around you that are very different than you. They have different ages, different backgrounds, different interests, different socioeconomic situations, different education levels. And in this church, we even have people with different languages. A lot of you in this congregation speak a different language than those in the first service, in the Mandarin speaking service. But you know what? A bunch of you do speak the same language. We need help. Those of us who don't, we need your help. A lot of you here actually share similar cultural backgrounds to the people in the first service. But you know what? A bunch of us don't. And even those of you that speak the same language and share the same culture and understand the basic differences between American culture and Chinese or Chinese American culture, you still may not relate well to them because of generational differences. So the question is, should it be a priority for me, for you, to reach out to people who feel different, to step out in faith, to risk, and to learn to love? And I'll tell you why it's a risk, because maybe it won't work out so well. Maybe they won't take to me. Maybe they won't be interested in me. Maybe we'll both be uncomfortable and it'll feel awkward. Or maybe they'll just sort of want to ignore me. And I don't mean that in a mean way. What I mean is people like to be around people that they like to be around. And so I can be very polite to somebody when I meet them and then never make an effort to reach out to them again. The title of this whole series is The Inconvenient Call of the Kingdom, because the call of God is often inconvenient. But among the preaching team, we were originally kind of referring to it as living in the kingdom together. One church living in the kingdom together. Now, Ryan asked at the beginning of this series, what do we do when the call of the kingdom starts to feel inconvenient? The answer? The kingdom is bigger than us. The kingdom doesn't exist to feed itself. It exists for others. And then the next week, Glenn shared on how we are one body, one church, many parts, and so we belong together. And then Job shared on the unity of worship. Whatever style or language or format that worship music takes, whatever your taste, the important thing is that we're worshiping in spirit and in truth. One of the songs they did that week was, did you feel the mountains tremble? Did you hear the oceans roar? When the people rose to sing of Jesus Christ, the risen one. Do you feel the darkness tremble when all the saints join in one song and all the streams flow as one river to wash away our brokenness. That's worship in spirit and in truth. And then Lance continued with advancing the kingdom. Christianity is not a solo thing. We do it together. And when one falls, the others can pick them up. How do we advance the kingdom? First of all, with love. The church is our love laboratory where we can learn to love each other. This is where we practice so that we can extend it out into the world. Risking in faith, living in love means living in community with the body of Christ. It means working together as a family. It means all of us, even the church around the world, coming together and following Jesus. One family under Jesus Christ. I have a little video that I'm going to show you because it says it better than I do. But I want to ask you a question. Do you believe that you are important? Do you believe that each member of this church, of this community matters?
Everyone knows Huskies like to run and Huskies like to sing. They don't combine that. It's like unheard of for a sled dog to sing while running because they're so focused. It's like a very different mode for them. The dog on the left is refried like the beans. She has a really incredible gift, which is that she sings while she's running. If anyone heard this particular song, they'd be like, oh, like refried's out on the trail. And she wouldn't just sing indiscriminately. She would sing when the team needed it most. It's 4 a.m. and we've been mushing all night and it seems like the sun's never gonna rise and like you can just tell morale is starting to get down. That's when she would sing. That song excited the whole team so much that I would have to grab the handlebars of the sled really tightly because they'd accelerate and I would fly off the back. The moment she started singing, like, refried, she passed away about a year ago after a really long, wonderful life. And one of the things that I was so sad about was that I wasn't gonna hear her song again. I remember the first run after she passed and I took the other dogs out and we were running through the woods and it was silent. And then all of a sudden I heard her again. It didn't make sense. It sounded exactly like her. I realized that the other dogs who would never, ever, ever have considered singing while running had learned the music from her and they were starting to sing in her absence so that her song would keep going in the team. We now have like a singing dog team, which that's not a thing. I can't emphasize enough how much that's not a thing, but it's because of refried. The impact that we have on our communities is so much more than we realize and it lasts. Refried is still with us. The joy that she brought is still with us because she brought it to us and that doesn't ever go away.
Each member of the community matters. So that means you matter. You're unique, weird, quirky, special, gifts and talents and experiences and background and opinions and contributions, they all matter to the church as a whole. And we are not complete if a piece of the puzzle is missing. We must be encouraged to do what we're called to do and to be what we're called to be, and we need to be encouraging each other. And that part is, in fact, stepping out in faith and living in love to make sure that we are including and inviting and embracing each other. I'd like to ask the prayer and the worship team to come up as I finish. Living in community the way that God intended is, in fact, risking in faith and living in love. I think this is important. I think it is important for us to take to heart the reality that we need to learn to love each other the best we can. And then we need to learn how to extend that out into the world. I can with confidence say that I guarantee it would make a difference in the world if the church was doing this. Now today, as we give you the opportunity to receive prayer, I just want to encourage you, if you're one of those people that feels like you have not been great at reaching out, making relationship, and extending love to others, ask for prayer. I feel convicted. I get it. I tease about being an introvert, but I am. And it doesn't come naturally to me. I have to step out in faith. And if you're one of those people that feels like you are not a part or you are not important, I apologize that we have not made that connection with you. And I want you to drum up your courage and get some prayer today. You can come forward to the prayer team, or if you're near someone that you trust, you can ask them to pray. Let's stand.